so should I kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, fire away, Euan.
Okay, well, hello and welcome to everyone. A big thank you for coming on to this seminar. I really appreciate it, actually, and I hope that it's going to be of use. I think I'm recognising a few faces, but just in case there's anyone there that doesn't know me, Euan Baxter, I'm the Park and Pipe Development Coach with Snowsport Scotland. I see that role as giving Scottish kids every opportunity they need to be as good as they can be at Park and Pipe, whether that's just going out and having fun or accessing the pathway towards world class. I have to hold my hand up. I'm not having much luck in this new technical landscape. I've had a whole series of disasters of late, and so if it all goes wrong, just please be patient, and I'll get things back up and running. You can see in front of you the chapters. I tried to give some structure to what I'm going to talk about, and at the end of each chapter I'll just have a pause, and that'll be a good point to for any questions or discussion that need be, or anything I've missed. I'll try and have a natural pause at each of them. And lastly, as I do work in Park and Pipe, this is going to be quite Park and Pipe focused, but I do believe it can apply across all the disciplines, so I hope we can pick that up as needed. Okay, I'm just going to sort my notes out. So just move it, we'll get going. Oh, there we go, it's not working already. Ah, there we are. So my intention for this presentation is to share some of the thinking I have on programming from on the day-to-day, and that should apply to you whether you're an instructor, a coach, or a club. I believe programming can be useful, and it's my aspiration to offer you insight into how a considered program can help drive progression. This isn't to say that no one's doing this already. Already looking at the attendees, I can see there's much experience in the room, and there's people on this call who have helped me shape my thinking. But it's my aspiration by sharing my thinking, I hope to provide you some tools to help your programs, and conversely, maybe generate some chat that can help me too. So the current landscape sees us all operating in bubbles, and yeah, I hope this session can help start some thinking, tee up some future discussions, perhaps when we see each other face to face again, and that would really benefit me. And I want to highlight what I'm going to present is by no means a concluded work. By the very nature of sport, everything's changing, and so the work in here is not finite in any way. Sport's always changing, and that's what keeps it interesting. So I guess my first question is to try to get an understanding of the room, if anyone has any programming in place already. So perhaps we have some people that are operating within a program, perhaps we have some people that are operating with none, and it'd just be good to get an understanding of if what that landscape is for the people on the call, which is worrying me in that question because I don't see the chat box. Is there a chat box, Niamh, on Zoom? Niamh might have left us.
Yep. No, I'm here. So if you click the bottom button, it should be running along the toolbar at the bottom. You see chat function.
Oh, it's at the top. There we go.
At the top. Oh, it's different for you. Of course it is.
Okay. Well, there's the chat. I don't know. So if anyone, wants to put in any examples, or just a no, I guess, if you've got no programming in place, or a yes, if you could put some answers in the chat, that'd be helpful, just to get an idea of the room. I'm probably looking at the wrong thing.
Or even if you'll just unmute yourself and just shout out. We've got a smaller group tonight, so
okay,
whatever you fancy.
Okay. No answers then. Well, that's all right.
I'll give you a quick answer.
I was about to type something and then Niamh said just to shout it out. So we obviously have stages of development that we work through. So competencies, I guess, are outcomes that we're looking at each stage before we progress the kids onto the next stage. And we do use Futures Awards, but in terms of, instead of using the Futures Award as in one session, we tend to do it over a bit of a block. So we kind of incorporate those outcomes into what we're delivering. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, Louise, I'm really pleased to have you on the call. Actually, it's certainly conversations we've had previously that have helped shape much of my thinking. So yeah, thanks for joining in.
Or-
I was just going to give you a no, Euan, so that doesn't really help you very much. Sorry.
No, that does help. It's just good to know where everyone's at, and yeah, how this seminar can better inform you. So that's great. Okay, I'll just get going from here. So we've definitely got some that do and some that don't, and that's more than fine. That's great. Thanks. So why do we need a framework or structure? My why on that, if I can get this thing to working. No, it's not working. I knew this was going to happen. Ah, there we go. Okay, so I think we all have love for the sport, and going into the why of sport, or the what is coaching question, can lead to some serious academia and navel gazing. So I simply want to promote a straight answer of navigation, being the need for a framework. So I think navigation of progression for the participants, navigation of content for the coaches, navigation of the program for the club. And what I mean by that is that being the engaging participants within the system, and navigation of understanding for the parents. I think that's how I would frame the need for a framework, simply so all those stakeholders can navigate through the system in front of them. If you can provide navigation to all the stakeholders, you're a step in the right direction of this picture here. The coach here has the kids engaged, motivated, connected, confident, and all the C's and I's from the theory. But sometimes the reality is when you get back to the slope, oh, it's done it again, is you're probably more faced with a picture like this. And then looking back for me, the instances of coach to athlete one-to-one time is really small actually out in the landscape. And as such, trying to be effective as a coach can be really difficult. Offering bespoke advice to multiple skiers within a group can be difficult, and balancing that across a group without diminishing perceived fair interaction across the board can be almost impossible. I think we've all been there. As a coach, you get smart, you set up a constrained learning environment, a short course and a lap. Each athlete appears at the top, gets a short line of advice, and as they go through the gate or drop in, and you watch, process, review, and then have to store that information in some pocket of your head as 5 others go through the course before athlete number 1 is back at your shoulder looking for advice again. And it's really tricky. And to combat that, what we do is we group all the athletes together in groups based on skills or age. And these clusters might have shared aims, but they very much contain individuals. When coaching those groups, it's almost, or the individuals, it becomes a very organic process, or it can be on the ground. So you're looking at your coach toolkit, probably TP, and it's really effective to interact with all the athletes, the participants, in a one-to-one nature, or I certainly found it to be. And I think if anyone was on Russell Enshaw's seminar a couple of weeks back, he noticed that with his kids skiing in Bulgaria, I think it was, that trying to pay attention to all the kids, it's quite a tough task. So, I mean, that almost comes to a tough statement, is that in the landscape, you're almost promoting all the big gains, all the big tricks, if you will. But having that one-to-one time to get into the micro can be really difficult. And it's my perception of what this diminishes is the athlete's ability to understand their own learning progression and take ownership of it, diminishes the ability of the coaches to effectively tailor progression and track it, diminishes the ability of the club or ski school to promote and communicate their program, and diminishes parent buy-in, which ultimately pays the wages. So my rationale behind competencies is addressing the right components at the right time for all the stakeholders, and using goals to service the need of the athletes' personal learning and buy-in. The coaches need to develop the athletes, and the clubs need to track and promote. And also keep those pesky parents in their place. We all know them, and I'm going to hold my hand up. That's me now. That's me at my kids' gymnastics class. Well, not quite. Hopefully not quite there. So that's my introduction around competencies. That's my introduction. I'll move into competencies straight away. So I just wanted to kind of assert what I mean by competencies, and I think this video is a good way to look at that. Fingers crossed this works. Here we go. You guys got sound? Oh no.
Hello, welcome to England. It's much more than bangers and mash. We got geezers out on the lash and local dealers flashing the cash. Council kids that way too flash, always raining, same old splash. Landlords that way too rash and the price inflation stops your stash. Hello, welcome to England. It's much more than fish and chips. We've got kids with too much lip and guys in the bits with sticks and bricks.
We'll just give that another one. Back to the start.
Hello, welcome to England. It's much more than bangers and mash. We got geezers out on the lash and local dealers flashing the cash. Council kids that way too flash, always raining, same old splash. Landlords that way too rash and the price inflation stops your stash. Hello, welcome to England. It's much more than fish and chips. We've got kids with too much lip and guys in the bits with sticks and bricks.
Okay, so that was Erok the dog, and yeah, I'm not sure the chat functions. Oh, it's disappeared again. I was going to ask if anyone, I beat me to it, but if anyone's got any thoughts on how competent Erok the dog is at skateboarding there, or if anyone wants to chime in. He was pretty good. Okay, so if I was to pull out a few things about Erok the dog, I'd firstly say he looks like he's having fun. Tongues out, there's not much of a tail there to wag, but he looks like he's having fun. It's also culturally relevant, or I'd imagine so, to the owner. The owner must certainly skateboard. There's a collaboration there between the owner and the dog. There's also prescriptive movements. The owner certainly promoted how to ride a skateboard to the dog. And I'd imagine for the dog, there's an extrinsic motivation that treats are involved. But it's also intrinsic. He's definitely having fun. And judging by the rest of the videos on Erok the dog's Instagram page, he's all about it. He's got some motor skills. There's some outcomes there. He's dropping in one of the videos, actually. So he's definitely practiced, and he didn't get overnight. It was built up by progression. And I think all those kind of encapsulate to me competency. Erok the dog is competent at skateboarding. And there's a comparison here to snowboarding and skiing. This is Fraser Jack, who's very confident at hand plants. And I'm not saying that Fraser Jack is a dog. But I would argue the same things are applying to what he's doing. He's having fun. It's culturally relevant to him, perhaps not his owner. There's been a collaboration there between him and his coaches. There's a prescriptive movement in terms of the hand plant. He's extrinsically motivated. There's people cheering him on in the background, but intrinsically, yeah, he's coming back around to having fun. There's definitely skill. There's an outcome. He's practiced, and he's built up by progression. So for me, that's how I would frame competencies. A motor skill and an outcome. For instance, a 360 landed and then ridden out. There's skill development to get you there: initiation, acquisition, consolidation, refinement. And if you're really going to town, you'll get creative variation. And so in short, to achieve a competency, you need an understanding of the skill and how it looks, feels, and acts like, and then plenty of practice. So just having a look about how we might break down some transition skills. This is a quick overview of some more detail I'm going to go into later. And then if you'll see over in column 5, there's hand plant. Now, this isn't necessarily a direct progression for a hand plant, but I think you get the idea that at some point to learn to ride a transition like Fraser Jack is, you'll need to learn the basics of just skiing up the transition and making a turn, and then going high enough up that transition to unweight. Excuse me. And then that'll build up into level 2, where you might air below the lip. Level 3, you might air out of the lip. Level 4, air out and grab. And then into level 5, you might start spinning or doing hand plants. And so there's this idea that one competency is built on another. You start low and you build up like blocks. And again, there's a little bit more to hand plant, which I'll come back to. but I just wanted to highlight the idea of linking the competencies together into a progression. So I'm going to move into futures and look at that in the next chapter, unless anyone's got any burning questions or insights into competencies or disagreement in how I'm framing that. And I'll take it as silence is golden.
I was just going to say it's I quite like where each stage is an achievement in itself, you know. So going up and doing a small 180, you know, that is an achievement. That's a trick. You know, it's not like it's just a step towards getting to this really far off goal. I think that's quite an important thing. So I mean, you know, right back to learning to slide on skis. It's if you can slide along and lift up one ski, you know, it's not just that's a step towards being able to rip around the mountain. That's a trick. That's a success. So.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think there's a couple of things I pull out with that, and hopefully we're going to touch on them later on, Roddy. But I think first of all, the idea of goals being rewards or an award as such, I think it's pretty powerful to kids. And again, Russell Earnshaw was talking about some work, I can't remember the name of the lady, in gaming, and the idea that you're hitting levels like a computer game. And I thought that's a really interesting comparison back into snow sports. And it's interesting when you start talking about tricks, straight away you start thinking of the park and pipe context, and then wondering, well, you know, in a traditional alpine context, is that challenging? But I think you've just framed it there quite neatly about the idea of skiing on one foot. If I forgot my terminology right, I think there's a white pass turn, and then there's javelin turns, and there's a few others that Andy Bennett gave me some info on that I've actually included in some of the information later on. And all of them, you know, although they're drills, they could be framed as awards. And I think that's really motivating to kids, the idea that you're passing trick goals like a computer game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think it's interesting taking it into an alpine context. I think you have to kind of get a bit more creative with your thinking. I think it's a lot more obvious in the park and pipe context to be able to go, right, okay, can you do a 180? Okay, well, that's going to build you onto 360, whatever. It is harder to think about it in an alpine context. I think it's trying to make it more like a game. I think Russ kind of said that thing, do we play at skiing kind of thing? Do we play at snowboarding? And how we actually frame that as opposed to going training. Like, no one wants to go training to training session. I'm kind of always quite wary of how we word things. It's the same as like when you call an athlete and when they're just a skier or a snowboarder kind of having fun. Yeah, and I think I totally get what you're saying. I think it's just interesting trying to put it into an alpine context. I think it works in a kind of ski school context when we're first getting kids through, but I think once they kind of get into the okay, well, I can carve a turn. Okay, how do we make those little goals, like gamify them, if you will, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thread, Louise. It'd be something I'd love to pick up more, actually, try and think about that, because as you say, although it's easy to interpret tricks as skills in park and pipe, I think you can argue that the skill of making good turns in alpine isn't dissimilar in any way. If anything, there's a lot more skill in many ways about the turns they're making and the minutiae of the detail. It'd be fascinating to break that down and present it as awards and levels.
Yeah, really, I think that's the kind of problem. It's like, okay, on the outset, it's like, well, you're carving a turn. Okay, is it a gradient of the hill that starts to make a difference? Is it terrain? Is it, okay, well, you're an icier pitch, all that kind of stuff. But it is because it's that kind of nuances, which to the naked eye aren't as obvious as the differences in tricks, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, well, I hope as we go through this then, maybe we could get some light bulbs, and then at the end I've certainly started to talk about, I'll start talking about delivery, and yeah, it'd be good to pick that up. If we don't tackle it in the seminar, then yeah, I'd love to pick it up in the future. Okay, so where are we? So I've lost my I've lost my place, bear with me. Okay, so yeah, we were going to go, I think, into futures. So futures, if you're not familiar, is effectively a skills-based approach to learning and utilising off-snow movements to support on-snow learning. The premise really was that you can practice all your tricks off-snow without your equipment on, practice the mechanics of what that looks like, so how you jump, how you rotate, and then apply it back on snow, really looking at the fundamentals of movement from a park and pipe perspective, the ABCs. But I'll just run through a video from the left. This is going to work. There we go. A few of you might have seen this before, but yeah, it's always nice to look back at what we did a couple of years ago at the left when the snow's good. A few years ago now, actually.
So we're here at the Lech in Scotland for a GB Park and Pipe Futures Award programme, which has given kids a really fun and inclusive way of practicing some off-snow skills and then looking at how we can transfer them on snow.
The Future Snow Award is really a new direction for us, and it has the two facets of on snow and off snow.
There's going to be 3 cones at the bottom of the slalom course. You're going to stop at the bottom of the slalom course and you're going to try some jumps. We're going to do a jump 90 like we practiced inside, and we're going to do a jump 180 on our skis and snowboard like we practiced inside.
The scheme really focuses on the mechanics that we look for in park and pipe, but takes them in a dry land setting. And by mechanics I mean movements, whether that's balance, agility, rotation, and those are elements that all free sports use.
What we're trying to accomplish is we can teach a lot of these underpinning mechanics and skills. This can transfer from any sort of sports. It could be a kid down a skate park, maybe not being able to be on skis or snowboard before, and hopefully any sort of free sport background by putting this in place, we'll hopefully get more people involved. It's just a really fun way for kids to get involved. It doesn't require a lot of equipment. All you need is really space, and then it's really transferable for any sort of free sport to then go and see if you can get on snow.
I think having a pathway for the younger generation is so important. Obviously, if they're getting into it really young, it's so much easier when they're older. I think giving them a structure as well and helping them doing all the jumping, landing stuff will really help them to prevent injury. I think it's so important. It is amazing.
Just jump straight into the pathway that's going to let these kids develop skills that can help them as they move into development teams and then hopefully onto the main teams for GB Park and Pipe.
So the Lech winner.
Okay, so that's an overview there of the futures. Oh, and I'm playing it again. Here's the cards. Just to highlight the idea that of practicing a movement off snow and then applying it to snow, and the benefit of taking people away from that complex environment, if you want to call it that, of snow. So taking their equipment off, taking their jackets off, taking the cold away and all those, and just a bit more of a static environment to really think about the fundamental of the movement. And there was a few aspirations, or there still is with Futures Award, about its outcomes, but the next video I think highlights one of the underlying themes of its intent from GB Park and Pipe, which I'm just playing now. Okay.
Hi, I'm Ron Coltest, and if you're feeling brave, here's how to do a backside double cox in 8. As I'm coming into the kicker, I'm on my toe edge, the same as the backside 7. As I reach to take off, all my weight is over the tail of my board and I throw my shoulder down towards it. I take off and I grab my board and start the first cork. Going into the second cork, I tuck in even tighter as this is where it feels like you want to open up. I spot my landing, and as I come down into landing, I land on my toe edge and ride away and claim as hard as you can.
Okay. So that was Roland Coultas doing a backside double cork 1080, and I just want to highlight a couple of things there around the intent of the futures. It was really to upskill kids at a young age on the mechanics, or not necessarily a young age, but further down the pathway, earlier on in the pathway, about the mechanics needed for park and pipe. And so first of all, you can see, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but there's defined carving lines into this jump. And so in the first instance, what's really important to highlight is that good board control or ski control is fundamental to park and pipe. You're going at high speed and you need to be able to set a clean edge as a platform for your tricks. As he goes through his, hold on, I'm just going to turn it down. As he goes through his takeoff, you'll see he's on his toe edge. And when he opens up the separation here, you can see that this T kind of shape that he has it's just not a movement you're going to get taught in ski school at the start of your snowboard career. It's a really difficult movement to hold and control. And ski school, although they're teaching all the mechanics that are underlying under that of posture, steering, stacking, separation, and the like, it's not organised in the manner that you would need if you were going to try and do that trick. And so, one intent with the futures was the idea of considering what the movements are for world-class performance, and then kind of reverse chaining it all the way down. What do the kids further down the pathway need to learn and when, so that they have the necessary building blocks and competencies to build all the way up towards that trick. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that was one component of futures, and I think I'm going to go into more detail of that, what that might look like in terms of programming, the idea of thinking about what's world-class performance and then chaining it all the way back down. So let's just watch Rowan one more time.
My weight is over the tail of my board and I throw my shoulder down towards it. I take off and I grab my board and start the first cork. Going to the second cork, I tuck in even tighter, as this is where it feels like you want to open up. I spot my landing, and as I come down into landing, I'm on my toe edge and ride away and claim as hard as you can.
Got to remember to claim. Okay, and back to our coat. No, oh, I've really lost it now. Yep, I knew it was going to happen. Another disaster. Hold on, I'm trying to get it back. Back to our rock. Oh, here we go. Nice one. Sorry about that. Okay, so that was the Futures Award. I'm just going to move now into the next chapter, unless anyone's got any thoughts on futures they want to highlight at all. Just pause for a second. Okay.
Sorry, I might just jump in. We were talking about Futures Awards earlier on today, actually, myself and Zoe Lewis and Kate Holt, actually, and talking about the competencies being there and all being really relevant, but how you actually deliver them in a session to make them engaging and kind of fun and almost gamifying them, because as they stand, they're actually quite dry, even though they're valid. So I'm not saying they're not valid, but actually how you actually deliver them in a session and incorporate them into other things. So it might be a game of, I play a game with, if you've got chalk on the ground, like chalk of lines and crosses. So they've got to jump from, this is dry land, jump from crosses to lines. And if you're landing on a cross, you're landing on one foot. And they've got to all move around. So they end up rotating, they end up landing on one leg. You can cue all the good things you want to see, but it's in a game sense, as opposed to, okay, we're going to jump 180 now, and this is the mechanics we want to see. We were just talking about how you actually use the Futures Award stuff in the actual coaching context, I guess, as it were, and as we've delivered it in both senses, as a standalone 1 day or 1/2 a day session, and we've also delivered it as a course of a program or in our regular program. And so when we've delivered it in our regular program, it's probably been slightly easier because we had more time, but we've just fed those things into other things we've been doing. But yeah. Yeah,
I really agree, actually. I've delivered it in all sorts of formats, and certainly getting through it all in 1 day can be a challenge. I very much like the idea of the on snow part being broken down to be a series of competencies to be completed over the course of a block of training. And then the off snow, I think, is really interesting, and I very much like it as a warm up as such. And so you play it as a game. And an interesting conversation I had with Gillian from Glasgow Ski and Snowboard Centre was the idea of perhaps we could turn it into a story. And I don't know if you've ever encountered Craig Roffney's warm-ups at the Lech, but he's really good at turning warm-up movements into a story about, I don't know, wading through deep grass and climbing up a mountain and the like. And he has the kids eating out of the palm of his hand. And I think, there could be real scope with that for the future, certainly for the younger kids in the off-snow. I think you could turn it into that. I think it'd be a bit more interesting, because I do agree sometimes if you really try and rattle through it all with young kids, yeah, they can get a little bit bored, unfortunately. So again, a delivery scenario there to consider, Louise, and yeah, be keen to pick that one up. Okay, yeah, the futures was one example of skill-based competencies, and then so if I'm thinking about a framework of competencies, well, let's have a look. I wonder what it would include. So I think whatever's in there should support the coaching and learning process. And I did a bit of work over the past little while during lockdown looking at the remit of our coaching awards, and it was fascinating to look at club space. I used Aberdeen as an example, and just think about all the needs there. So particularly around the 10, 14 and 16-year-old space. The 6-year-olds was more looking at the ski school space, but I tried to review what was in place and think about it from an athlete need. And so just I'll draw your attention to some details quickly. So the top level there, what talks about fundamentals, learning to practice, train to train and train to compete, are part of what's called a long-term athlete development model, which has been around in sport theory for quite some time. But what's interesting is that Sport Scotland have recently updated theirs, and myself, Christy McKinnon and Sarah Young have been looking at how we embrace that within Snowsport Scotland to represent our pathway. So just touching that briefly, the work will come out soon, but our pathways are always what's called an organogram, if I get that right, and it looks at how the governance, and so you might start in a ski school and then in a club and then join a Scottish squad and then move up into GBS. And although that's helpful in understanding the landscape, it doesn't really promote athlete need or coach need. And so a long-term athlete development starts to tackle that, about looking at the needs of the athletes as they progress through a system. And we're hopefully going to be releasing our updated pathway, that information in it soon. And I'll be coming back around onto the LTAD further on in this seminar when we start talking about delivery needs. But sorry, yeah, I should crack on. So we've got that along the top, and then I looked at what the skiing skills may be, where they might be in the futures level, what the basic skills in terms of boxes and rails, then jumps, what they might be doing over the jumps, as well, and the tricks, and so the levels, just to try and get an understanding of, okay, roughly what is the need of participants or athletes within the club space. From there, I then flipped that the other way around and looked at the delivery needs, and so who's delivering to those kids or those participants, and what do they need to support behind them. So ski instructor might be delivering on the fundamentals, a foundation coach above that, then a performance coach, and what system are they working in, whether it's a ski school or a club program, and then what do they need on the ground, what other skills do they need to help deliver. And as I mentioned, this was myself looking at the coach remits, which is another bit of work I've been doing. And then from there, for the purposes of competencies, I looked at that and go, okay, so what's the what? And so there's basic skiing and snowboarding, which I call the platform skills. There's the futures, which is the ABCs of park and pipe, the park and pipe tricks itself, so jumps, rails, transitions, and then movement, so cross sport and movement literacy, which really for kids these days is really fundamental. And I think, Louise, you could probably attest to that more than anyone with the great stuff you're doing at G-Snow. I then looked at the athlete need. So if athletes are operating in all those what's, what do they need to support them? So again, looking at long-term athlete development, so what stages are they at in their development? What staff do they need beside them? How should it be delivered to them? And then their own personal development. And then lastly, what's the facility, so the support and infrastructure to support all that happening. So I'm just going to try and go through these relatively quickly to give you a bit of an insight into how I've structured these into levels of competency. So skiing or snowboarding, platform skills. So I've included quite a few here around basic snowboarding and skiing, and then try to give a level across the board. And yeah, as I mentioned at the top, this work's all ongoing, and it's it's in no means, I don't know what the word would be, extensive. You know, there's probably a lot more to add in here, but first and foremost is the idea that people need some basic knowledge to interact with the sport. And so you'll see there in level 1 is just the idea of being able to self-equip, be able to ride the tow, be able to ski independently, and then move up, be able to set your bindings, whether that's ski or snowboard, and the day-to-day checks of your equipment. Level 3 might be able to wax, look after your gear, how to clean it. Level 4 is getting into equipment choice, and then level 5, which I can't see, which is in the way, but I believe it's equipment choice related into equipment tactics. So, you know, if you're riding pipe, you might need a different snowboard to what you might take on slopestyle, similarly for cross or slopestyle ski. And then for snowboarding and skiing, I think pretty straightforward. I think everyone in the room here has got the experience. So, you know, you start off some basic maneuvers and then build up on them. And, you know, I think we talked earlier about skiing in one ski, so white pass turns. We've got dolphin turns, stork turns. If you think snowboarding lingo is funny, then skiing lingo's beats it hands down. But I think that the basic premise is the idea that you start with some simple tricks, as Roddy alluded to earlier on, and then you can build on that all the way up. So that was skiing and snowboarding. And then, oh, come on. There we go. So features is interesting in that I described it as the ABCs of park and pipe. Agility, balance, coordination, and edging and rotation. I guess that's the key elements within it. You'll see there's the level 1, which has been updated a little bit with some new tricks. In running the level 1, it was some of the tricks were actually quite difficult for the age group that we're targeting, so we've reframed them, and the level 1 now focuses really on balance, and now in the level 2 is focusing on separation, and that's a new syllabus over there for the level 2. There is work in pipeline for a level 3 as well, but at the moment it's 1 and 2, which will be rolled out again this year. Excuse me. And the reason I've included features is that I almost see them as the kind of glue, the building block between skiing and snowboarding and park and pipe tricks, which is our next one. Okay, park and pipe tricks. So in this one, I've just included one level as an example, so level 3. So there would be a level 2 and 1 before it, and a 4 and 5 after it. But there's so many laterally across this that I wanted to just touch through them. So again, there's this fundamental idea of knowing your grabs, perhaps dropping a landing switch, and then switch, plier, skidded turns. And then we move into the more obvious, perhaps with park and pipe, which is tricks. So at level 3, for the sake of this competency, the argument is that for a tabletop, you should be looking at spinning your 180s all 4 ways, which spinning all 4 directions is really important for park and pipe or performance park and pipe. And so again, if you're working on the 180s all 4 ways, you can build it up into 3s and 5s later on. And then we've talked about the RAG rating. So green is doing them well, perfect every time. Amber is, you know, almost an acquired skill, and then red is initiation, acquisition. So you're just trying that for the first time. And as you can see there, there's levels for male and female, and then it goes tabletop and jumps on free ski, jump with snowboard, transition, and then I think it's rails over the side. The next column I've got is movement, and I've put the level 2. So for cross sport, acro, tricking, skateboarding, and trampoline. Now I do have detail on what that may look like. I was a bit hesitant to put it in there, though at the moment it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I think the basic premise is that kids within snow sport and any snow sport should be doing cross sport activity. And certainly for park and pipe, acro, tricking, skateboarding, trampoline are the things that we'd encourage the kids to do. And I'll come back later to an example of how that can directly impact skills and maneuvers. And then fitness over to the side there. So you have agility and coordination, balance work, and being able to hold tension and able to work, able to maintain the work ethic through a session. So for level 2. So again, an example, and there'd be a level 1 all the way through to 5 for each of them. So let's get into this one, which I think is really interesting. It needs quite a bit more work from my perspective, but I think it'd be really useful and understanding our coaching landscape better. And that's the idea of, first of all, accepting that athletes in our pathway have stages. The learn to train stage would be level 2. So they should be working on gross and fine movement skills and able to self-master movement. They might be new to certain aspects of the sport and likely going through a growth spurt. Now, the information in LTAD models or the development stages is always up for contestment or debate, but I think that captures it in the simplest form. So that was perhaps where your athlete might be, and for the staff that's needed to support that, we're probably looking at a foundation coach, and they should have an understanding of all the level 2 technical standards. So what we looked at in the red bracket, and all the fitness or movement components from the purple bracket. And so with that, they should be able to form good lesson plans and have a current understanding of the sport. The third column is about delivery, and very much how the staff would deliver to the athletes at that level. So structured but fun-based sessions. The athletes can be unaccompanied in a closed environment. They are exploring the sport, and you should provide situational interest and environmental stimuli. Column 4 is professional development for the athletes themselves. So looking at building confidence, promoting competence, building connection with their peers, and developing character. And then lastly, my 5th column there is competition. So competition between themselves, or sort of with one another, and jams with their peer group. And so what you'll notice is that this is a competency starting to drift away from the athletes directly, but I think it's a key component of anyone's program, is to understand how you're going to support those other competencies and needs. And so that's what I've tried to capture here. And like I said, I think I can see a good bit of work going into this, and I really hope that it comes back around and really informs our coaching qualifications as well. Okay, and then the last one is facilities and support and infrastructure. And again, this is park and pipe, but I think in Alpine, certainly I could see this being framed quite well as well, about what you need to promote key skills. So it's quite simple in park and pipe. You might start with a low box, a small jump, some form of transition, and varied terrain, and then that really builds up through the levels. And similarly, in reduced risk, if you're asking kids to do cross sport and acro and tricking, they're going to need the facilities to support that. And that builds up hand in hand with their aspirations or their progressions on snow. In many ways, this would seem quite obvious, but I'm really keen that it's captured. I think without an understanding of what facility you have to support performance, I think it undermines your ability to deliver, or question how you can deliver, or look for other environments to deliver. And so I think it's, I personally believe it's quite important to capture this. So that was a brief run through. I hope it was brief. Apologies if I'm whittering on, of the what's, the how, and the where. And these are all the elements I think that I would see as part of any framework. So just before I jump into programming, which is in the next chapter, is there just any thoughts on that? I know I've just torn through it quite quickly.
I was going to say I could talk for hours on this stuff, so I'll try not to. But from a movement point of view and a movement literacy point of view, I guess that's kind of my bag for sure. And really trying to encourage kids to have a really broad base of activity in the first place. And I because I've seen what Park and Pipe are doing, and how obviously acro being the really obvious thing that translates into their sport, but actually using your idea of looking from world class and running it backwards, when you then actually go, okay, well, what does a world class ski racer actually look like? If you're thinking about Alpine, actually they are the guys that can do a multitude of other sports. If you think of good athletes, they are good athletes across the board, whether it be you could throw a mountain bike at them, or you could see them climbing or surfing or doing loads of other things. So I think we have to be really mindful in racing especially, of really thinking about how we try and avoid early specialisation and really try and encourage kids to do a multitude of different activities. And yeah, like it comes from everything. Like, okay, well, actually, we're training 4 nights a week doing ski racing. Okay, well, or you're expecting a 10-year-old to be a full-time athlete. Okay, well, how are they actually able to get involved in other activities if we have such high expectations of them in what they're doing? So yeah, I'm a massive believer in kind of multi-sports. We do the social enterprise that I run runs a lot of like big obstacle courses, so getting kids on monkey bars, getting kids climbing, crawling, ninja steps, like the works, and then parkour as well, which I kind of think ties it all together. But I like that stuff.
Yeah, that's great, Louise. And like I say, I think we've had conversations previously, but I'm always keeping an eye on what you guys are up to over at G Snow, and always impressed. I think you're really heading in the right direction there. I think it's fantastic.
I also, in terms of the facility side of things, I think if you think of things from an ecological approach anyway, so if you're thinking about constraint-based theory, if you are completely constrained by what you have in front of you, so clearly, like if I was delivering stuff at Afford and I've got a freestyle athlete, at some point you're going to want to go to Aberdeen to get off the kicker and the tabletop. It's like that's kind of a fairly common sense thing, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just going back to that one, I think it was the last one, is the idea that, at some point I guess it's fledging the nest, really. Your athlete is going to have to look further and further afield. And we see that across all sports. Scotland can support everyone up to a point. But then one of the key transition points for Park and Pipe is that jump to European level training. And then likewise, from us to GBS would be up to world class too. And I think you can see that across all the disciplines. But just to pick up your point about backward chaining it from world class, that's where I'm going to jump into next with the programming. So I'll just jump in there now. So how do we piece it all together? So this little complicated, this is one of your standard X versus Y axis performance graphs that you might see. And it's an interesting piece of work, a tool, if you will, that we use internally. We don't generally publicize it too much because there could be a perception of that it's grading or ceilings, if you will, and that's not how we want to use it. In the first instance, it has age up one axis and then a series of tricks along the bottom, and we can use that to kind of produce trend lines, if you will, or that athletes would have to go through to reach world class. And this is the initial piece of work behind this was from Hamish McKnight, and what we might do is mark where all our athletes in our pathway are on this to kind of get an understanding of trend lines and where people are and how our programs can best support them. What we've done, or what I did by colouring all in and then slanting the lines, was just try and develop these kind of transition points, if you will, that people might jump from. And I guess this piece of work actually noted where the Scottish facility ceiling is for Park and Pipe. So once you get to a certain level, you might be in a development group, you might be looking at 7s and 9s, but that transfer from medium to large jumps there, that's a ceiling in Scotland. That effectively that means you're fledging the nest and you're going to Europe if you want to access that level of training. But the reason I bring this up is just the idea that up on the right hand side is main team status and that level, and then down the bottom you're all the way at, not down the bottom, but down the left hand side you're at the base of the pathway, just entering it perhaps in a club. And any program, I think, or this is a helpful tool in determining the program from A to B for those athletes. Just note that as I noted at the top, the sport is ever changing, so this is always changing as well. So just moving on from this, this is what all the competencies that we ran through look like when you put them all together, and it's just interesting to look at them you could, it's quite a lot to take in. As you can see, there's quite a few holes in there as well. It's not completely populated at this stage, but certainly most of the work happened in the red area on technical park and pipe competencies, and the yellow area on base skiing, and then the purple fitness and the delivery and the facility work is still ongoing. And it's actually been really helpful for me putting together this presentation and reflecting all of this work. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to getting into the rest of it. But I think what you'll notice is the idea that there's the lateral levels. So I wonder if you can see my cursor. Effectively, this is all level 1, which is maybe a sub freestyle. And the idea would be that we'd be looking, or it would be an idea that these competencies are all met prior to someone coming into a freestyle program, which is down here. And this would be the start of the freestyle program. And all these competencies would be relevant for an athlete coming out, or a participant coming through that program, and then moving into perhaps a development group within that club program, then down into level 4, which would be the performance group. And then the next group would be access to Snowsport Scotland training squad. And so it's very much the idea that, again, it's these building blocks of processes and just trying to assert all the individual components across all those different elements of skiing and snowboarding, futures, technical park and pipe, movement and literacy, delivery and facility are all really relevant. I think, Louise, you called it an ecological landscape, or an holistic system. I think it's really important to think about all of them. And what you can start to do is just realize how they chain together. So if I got this right, yeah, so there's Fraser down there on a hand plant, which is one of the competencies on the transition at level 5. But you don't just get there by just moving through the hand plant column, as it were. He would have started learning tripods, which is skiing and snowboarding fundamental. But again, learning tripods, that's not the start of your progression. It would be over here in movement literacy, learning a cartwheel. So I just want to promote the idea that in developing a framework of competencies, and this is an example I've produced, I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, but it's the idea that there's lateral movement as well. And as you come through level 1, you have to understand that everything in there needs to address the next building block above that, and the next building block above that. Okay, so then you can take all of them and frame them in something a little bit more simple. Now this is, interestingly, I've pinched an Excel document from Ian Ransley Clapham, who, if anyone knows, is a genius with Excel, certainly better than me. But there's I've just used this to frame or tidy up the idea that down the bottom you have an entry level, which is interesting, is the opposite way from how I framed it in the previous slide. But they have level 1 milestones through each of those elements, and then as you progress up, they support one another. So it's very much a building block, one on top of the next. Okay, so, and then the aspiration is, of course, that once you come back round to these guys and you have a framework to support them and they're learning and progression, you can start to look at this picture in a bit more of a positive light. I mean, these kids actually look like they're having fun. They're just finishing up a good session. They're happy because they knew their goals, they took ownership of them, and they achieved them. And their coach was able to coach to their individual needs. The club could use a framework to program effectively, and the parents were happy to foot the bill. So my hope is, or my general belief is that a framework of competencies, if you can build it up in your club, utilize it effectively, it's just going to make everyone's job that a little bit more easy. There is more considerations to than that, of course, and I think we've touched on them quite a bit, especially around the delivery. But I think first and foremost is the idea that if you're using a framework of competencies, it's how you communicate them to the athletes, so their perception of them. And we chatted about this at the top about Russ's idea about computer games and them being awards, and the idea that you're reaching the next level. I think you have to frame your competencies in a positive light, not barriers or ceilings to the athletes. And then on the delivery by the coaches as well, I think you have is similarly as to what I was just talking about, actually just framing them in the right light and giving them to the athletes and letting them take ownership of them, I think is really important. But for everyone to do that, there has to be a solid understanding of what it is you're asking them to do, and how to coach and deliver it. And then furthermore, I think that goes hand in hand with how the club promotes and tracks as well. I think all of these have to just be handled correctly to promote autonomy and competence and community. So, touching on self-determination theory there, but I think it's quite important that these are framed in the right way. And so that's me. In conclusion, I hope this has been insightful. I hope it can be of use. We've started some good conversations. I think for some, this has already been enacted. For others, I hope it's been of use. And that's my email there. I'm really more than happy to pick up at any time with anyone about any of this. I'd hope that any discussion, or I'd like to think any discussion we have could better inform my thinking on this. This isn't a finished work, as I said. I'm working closely with Aberdeen for some of these competencies, and some of this work is going to be integrated with what they're doing there. But I'm more than happy to share and engage with anyone, and particularly across the different disciplines. I think it'd be fascinating to look at them and gain insight into alpine or cross, and how we can backwards change and make a difference in park and pipe too. But that's me. If anyone's got any further questions.
Well, thanks, Euan. That was good. A bit out of my comfort zone, but found a lot of interesting stuff in there, so thank you.
Okay, no trouble.
I'm not a snowboarder.
Yeah, well, park and pipe skiing too. But yeah, no, you're right. As I said, it's quite park and pipe focused, but I hope there's the basic concepts there of putting in a framework can be helpful. And yeah, I hope it just gives some thought, if anything else.
I definitely did. I really like the idea of cross sport as well, encouraging them to do more than one sport, because I think that's important.
Okay, that's really great to hear. Actually, I've got a new colleague, Christy McKinnon, and yeah, we're very much got a conversation going about that. Excuse me, from a park and pipe perspective, as if you can't edge correctly down the hill, if you can't make good turns, then you've got no chance of a 20-30 foot booter, to be honest. And likewise in alpine, if all you can do is make turns and you don't know how to adapt to terrain or go in the air, yeah, you're going to find yourself in trouble. So yeah, that's a conversation we're very much pursuing at our side.
I guess that's one of the things that I would think about. So when we put in LTADs, then you start off, right, okay, the 6-year-old is on this LTAD, whereas actually it's just a 6-year-old. So how does the 6-year-old know that they're on a park and pipe pathway? Are they on a park and pipe pathway, or are they just having fun on a pair of skis or snowboards? Maybe they're going to be an alpine skier. And actually, I guess that's what we do at GSO in terms of having trying to encourage a really broad base, so that they have that broad foundation, which is going to support them whatever direction that they want to go in when they get further up the pathway. Because like you say, actually, you need to be able to carve a turn, you need to be able to hold a solid edge to hit a kicker, but equally you're going to need to be able to do that to race, and equally you really need to be comfortable in the air if you're going to race as well. So actually, all those things is a solid foundation, and it's always a question I have over at like LTAD plans, because it's kind of assuming, even a 10-year-old, that we're also assuming that we're on a performance pathway, when actually they could just end up being a skier that just flipping loves skiing, so actually how we kind of manage that sometimes is a thing to think about anyway.
Yeah, I think so. And interestingly, as I mentioned, we've been looking at the Sport Scotland LTAD, and it has the phase 4, which is parallel, I can never say that word, to the other phases. It's a good thing I don't coach alpine. And it's the idea of sport for life, or snow sport, and from our side, snow sports for life. And so if you have these stages of development, you also have snow sports for life. And it's not to say that they start or finish at any point, but that you should be able to access or intertwine between the two. Yeah, part of our conversation right now is how to present that and promote that, the idea of snow sports for life. And although you're going through stages of what's termed athlete development, you may just be on a pathway having fun, and that's perfectly fine.
Hi, Euan, it's Craig. I just wonder if I could pick up on one thing you mentioned at the very end there. There's more about sort of coaches' roles. And I think as head coaches or lead coaches, we could improve upon designating coaching roles to people who we are working with or co-coaches. And that transcends, park and pipe, alpine, Nordic, everything. Sometimes we can just get into our own role and coach our own way, but as a head or lead coach, we could improve upon delegating roles to coaches working with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I touched upon that, and apologies if I rattled through it. I think there's certainly an understanding, or what I tried to put in there in the delivery component was the idea that as a coach working at a certain level, there's a certain responsibility of what you deliver and how you deliver it, and the knowledge required to that. And there should be, I think I highlighted, say at level 2, you're really focusing on those level 2 competencies. And it's been really interesting thinking about that in my head about how we, how would I say, engage in our coaching framework to promote that, because I think it's not about putting coaches within ducats in any way, but it's just to highlight that there's at certain stages there is responsibilities or core components that should be the focus. So yeah, I think that's an interesting topic and something to explore. And I think part of that actually is of note with the current coach syllabus is that there's not really a framework of competencies that's handed over. We deliver what's currently now a 2-day level 1, and then there's an assessment, and the level 2 or the new performance coach award is 5 days. But it's all on hand material, but there's not necessarily a framework or syllabus that you have to then engage with your participants or your trainees. But at this point, I'm not sure if on the need for that, and that'd be an interesting conversation to pick up with yourself, Craig, or others within the landscape about if you feel you're confident enough or happy enough with using your existing acquired knowledge to do that, or whether some kind of framework of syllabus or competencies would be helpful from us to then utilize, as you say, to your program coaches.
Yeah, Euan, totally agree. I think a lot of it's experience based and knowing the coaches you're working with and what you can ask of them. But yeah, you're right. It's certainly maybe a slightly off topic subject, but one that some of the more experienced coaches, and there's quite a few of them online here tonight, would be worthwhile thinking about how they lead their own team of coaches too, myself included. Thanks.
Oh yeah, no, great. And yeah, thanks for coming on, Craig. And that was a great comment. And actually, I think that is part of one of the ideas of developing a framework is having a framework for your coaches to effectively operate within. So yeah, I hope that's been of help. Okay.
Perfect. No, thanks so much, Euan. It was really helpful. Sorry, I've been kind of dipping in and out of 2 different sessions, so I kind of was listening to some of it and listening to some of Kieran's. But no, thanks so much for everyone for coming along. We'll kind of share any resources in this presentation on the website as well, so that you can share it with anyone that wasn't able to attend tonight. But yeah, thanks so much for everyone for coming, and thanks again, Euan, for a really great presentation.
Oh yeah, no trouble. No, yeah, I'm really glad to have people on board engaging with this, and yeah, like I said, more than happy to pick it up later on. Don't be surprised if your phone goes and it's me at the other end. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Thanks, Euan. Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.